Michelle here, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down the Steven Universe art style and then using it to finally truly draw my gemsona, myself, as a crystal gem. Before we get started, I just want to say that I've made some updates to my Patreon, so now no matter how much money you are able or are willing to contribute, everybody has the same equal opportunities to be involved in my channel, which means anytime I start a project to make it into a video, I'll be posting the information on my Patreon before I even start filming. That way, during the drawing process, not only am I going to be doing my own rendition of that drawing like I normally do, but you guys can show me your renditions of that same project. Then at the end of every video, I'm not only going to be showing my drawing, but a showcase of your drawings too. So if that interests you, make sure to hit the link in the description to join my Patreon, and while you're at it, maybe check out some of my merch and be like this guy. So one of the first things I started doing is breaking down the shapes of the Steven Universe style for this sort of body type that I'm going for, which is something similar to Pearl and Lapis. They're both really similar, though Lapis has more curves than Pearl does, but I didn't want as many curves, so I just traced the simple shapes and compared them to each other so I could learn how to do those shapes when drawing myself. It took a couple tries to really get a hang of where the hips go, because hips are quite honestly my weakest area in drawing. I just don't know where they go in relation to like the crotch and the belly button and where the legs come out of the actual hips. But eventually, after doing it enough, I got a little more comfortable with the shapes that I was going for and decided to go on and start making a silhouette. With a silhouette, basically all you're doing is just drawing a really large, broad area without worrying about the details. You're just worrying about the main silhouette of the entire shape. Of course, it doesn't have to be exact, and most of the time it's very abstract. This is a technique that I use when I'm not quite sure what poses to make, because sometimes within the blobs of the silhouette that you're making, you might find a different shape that you weren't really thinking of doing before. Sometimes these weird strokes and messes of black ink end up making shapes within it that you might see that somebody else might not. That's why I really like doing this, because not only does it help me get an overall sense for the balance and the pose that I might be going for, but sometimes a few surprises get thrown in along the way too. Like this, for example, this hand. I have no idea what the hand's supposed to be. I just threw in some shapes, and then eventually I found a shape within that shape. And then when I have a good silhouette that I want, I end up going into more detail and sketching on top of that to find the similar shapes that I found before when tracing over the main characters. And here you can see me tracing over the hand and trying to come up with one of the first poses, and it still kind of looks okay, but when you zoom into it a lot, you can tell that there's really no structure there and I don't know what's going on. So I go over it multiple times until I actually find something that actually works and looks semi like an actual hand. Another thing that took a while is the shape of the hair, because I knew a general shape that I wanted to do, but I also wanted it to actually look like the style. So I looked at Amethyst with the way some of her hair floofs. I looked at Lapis to see also the way some of her hair floofs looked. And then for the part of the hair, I looked at Jamie, because he's one of the only characters that has a sort of part like that. I just happened to not do it as huge and drastically as his. And then came the lines, just going over these sketches I had before, really refining where these things are supposed to go and solidifying the general design, which is quite honestly one of my favorite parts. Without any color, I just love the way that line art looks against white. Just the black against the white, the contrast is so crisp to me, I just love it. But of course, for most of these simplified cartoon characters, if you've seen the sketch, you've seen the line art, so let's move on. Don't want to be repetitive. One thing I did forget to record actually was me drawing the hoodie, because that's not the same as the line art and it would not have been repetitive, but there it is. I did, however, record myself drawing the gem. I liked the idea of the gem being on my chest and that the zipper of the hoodie was kind of zipped down enough that you could see it, similar to Amethyst, but like with a zipper. And I did this sort of like eyeball shape, but vertically. What am I doing with my hands? I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to simplify, but I saw that shape when I was looking up the gem that I'm using online, and I thought it was unique. None of the other gems really have that in the show yet, so I just decided to use it. Plus, the shape looks really cool with the way the zipper is, and so, you know, I kept it. And now that I mentioned the gem, you're probably actually wondering what the actual gem is that I'm using for my gemsona. And that is iolite. It's a dark bluish kind of purpley colored gem, which is great for my hair, which is not the color it's supposed to be right now, but when I have money, I'll touch it up. When I have money, oh, link to my Patreon, it's down there, oh, how fun. Then after all of the liner was completed, I started filling in all of the base colors, which is kind of also repetitive and boring. So you can see me starting with the base, and then I add some of the individual shapes after that. Something interesting about Krita, which I'm using for this instead of Photoshop, because Photoshop costs money, which I don't have, is that when you're selecting something on a certain layer, if everything else is visible, it'll select according to all of the layers and not just the layer you're on. Just kind of made a habit of hiding the layers that I wasn't trying to select, so. And here you can see a nice shot of all of the base colors with not only myself as a human, but also myself as a gem. Even though a lot of the outfits that the gems wear are sort of like gem-like and less human-like, some of them still wear things that are similar to humans. And I figured my character would still be me, so it would still be something that she would do, wearing something cozy like a hoodie. And of course, it makes more sense when you think about this being after Little Homeschool, my character kind of being unbubbled after the war. What happened to Pumpkin, by the way? Has anybody noticed that? Is Pumpkin alive? What happened to Pumpkin? Continuing on with the color, I'm going to be making my hoodie on my human self tie-dye. Surprise! I only did one other time in this, and I kind of don't like how it turned out. So I decided I wanted to make it actually look like actual tie-dye with the spiral and everything. So I started doing that here with a watercolor brush, and I'm using the colors off of Bismuth's hair because, wow, that's hard to say. Using the colors from Bismuth's hair. Before it was hard to say words because I had giant teeth in the way, but now it's braces. Bismuth. Bismuth's hair. Bismuth. Her head is rainbows, it's the same colors, so I decided to use those colors to do the hoodie. It ended up looking really close. I was looking at my hoodie in particular for the different areas of the colors and where they went and how they looked. Not trying to get it exact, but just, you know, close. Because what other reference for tie-dye do I have? Probably Google, but and then, you know, now that I think about it, Google probably worked. After that was done, I filled in a solid bluish color over both of the characters to give it an overall kind of bluey tint. Then I duplicated that layer to create the shadows and just erased where I wanted the light to come from. I've learned recently that it's a lot easier to draw where the light is hitting and where it's coming from and just let the shadows be rather than try and figure out where the shadows would land from the light. The last few times I've done it, however, have been more of a detailed, softer look. But this, because it's a cartoon and I wanted to replicate the style of the cartoon, I'm simulating cell shading, which is shading with hard edges like they would have been on cells back in the day when there was traditional animation. Not just drawing it on paper, traditional animation, but like with the giant machines that took pictures of the cells that like dozens of people each did layers on. Oh man, animation back then. Like think about all the animators that are doing things on YouTube right now, the individual animators, and they still have to have teams to help them when they get big enough. Imagine if you were doing that kind of stuff back then in like the 20s. No way. And even though we don't use that big machine anymore, we still call it cell shading because it still replicates the original cell shading. Now when you're doing this, just keep in mind where the general light goes and don't really worry about all the details yet. You're just blocking in most of the light. And then after that, after you have the general idea of where all of the light is hitting, then you can zoom in and go into all the details and put back some shadows and put some light in to those really tight, precise spaces. Really tight, precise spaces. Precise spaces. So that... Then after that was done, I just messed with some of the levels and then lowered the opacity of that area as well, just to make the shadows a little more subtle and not as in your face. And what the heck was that? And with all that done, this is what my characters ended up looking like. Myself as highlight. But compared to the last two times I drew myself in the Steven Universe style as a human and as a gem, this is a lot better than those. It's quite possible that if Rebecca Sugar actually drew this, they would probably make my head a little more thin, but the way I personally draw Steven Universe characters, this face shape was just a lot easier for me to do. And that's something to keep in mind if you're going to be drawing your own gem, or if you're going to be replicating the style using this video or any of my other Steven Universe videos or tutorials. Every artist is going to draw differently, whether it's the same style or not. This is a good example of that. These are the way that multiple artists draws the different characters. They all draw for the show. These are all variations of the characters that end up on TV, but you can tell that even though the characters look the same, there's still slight differences, so you don't have to obsess over every single detail being exactly the same. So keep that in mind when doing anybody else's style, and trust me, you are good enough. If you're new here, please subscribe because I'm going to be making videos a lot more frequently than I was last year. Give the video a like if you liked it so that I know you did. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye! I used to have so much more energy.